My name's Brian Horn, and I am the responsible officer for the Learning Machine. What I'm going to do today in this short webinar is to talk through the arrangements for awarding this summer, particularly in line with the Vocational Contingency Regulatory Framework. I'm going to talk through the processes and also the documentation that needs to be completed in order for you to assess your students and then submit teacher assessed grades to us in line with a series of quality assurance requirements. So I'm going to talk those through. What I'll be doing today is sharing a number of screens, and during this process I'll be able to talk through the steps on a one-by-one basis. So to begin with then, let's share the overall process. Okay, so this is the overall process. In the first instance, centres need to consider the evidence that's going to be used. Now, typically that would be coursework, which might be fully completed or partially completed, test results or homework results, or a range of evidence. And in our guide material, we've set out the type of evidence that can be used. It's then a case of collecting those evidence pieces for each of the learners and making sure that those are accurately logged and stored, and you know exactly what it is for each student that you're going to be using. You then make a decision as to the sufficiency of the evidence. Now, we have set out what we mean by sufficiency, but just to explain it a little more. If you're looking at the knowledge and the skills and the understanding within the specification for a qualification, if you have above 50%, and you feel at that stage you can make a judgment as to where that student will land at the end of the programme, then I think you've got a sufficient bank of evidence. It's obviously a little bit for the centre to determine, and either way of 50%, give or take 2 or 3%, it's not a problem. But it's enough for you to be able to make a decision. I think that's the key point. Can you then stand by that judgment based on the evidence that you've used? So having done that, if you need to make a plan to create more evidence with the students, then obviously you will need to put that in place. And it might well be that in certain areas, students need to do more work. Now, in those areas, you can basically build up the evidence base to the point where you feel you've got enough to make a judgment. Also within this, there's an evidence quality judgment. So checking whether the evidence quality is okay. And I mean, in certain circumstances, it might well be that students need to redo a piece of work because you know it's not of the right quality. When you've gone through that process, then effectively you're in a position to assign a teacher assessed grade. And it's at that point that you would be looking at last year's results and having a look at the student profile and making a decision as to whether that was a feasible set of results that you could stand by. If you feel that that's all okay, then you're pretty much ready to have that as a high level sign off. Now, it's at that stage when a head of department or a senior member of staff has checked the process and signed it off that you're ready to submit the teacher assessed grades. Now, what we do require at that point is before you submit the teacher assessed grades, that you set out this process for us. So how have you done this? And I'll stop sharing this screen for a moment and move on to another screen. Okay. So what we have here now is the head of centre declaration, and this document is also in the frequently asked questions section, where we have a partially completed one of these. But the way this works is that this process, just talk this through. So the centre name is added here, the head of centre name, the date, and it's obviously signed. So against each row, and I'll go along the row basically, you add in the subject, you add in the qualification number. You add in the method, going back. Which method here did you use? So you set out the method, and it might well be that in this box here, you write something like 2 pieces of coursework and a range of 6 to 8 homeworks used to determine grade. So that's the type of information that you'd add in there. This one here, in line with TLM requirements, it's very much a tick box. So have you checked that you've read through the guidance? Is your process in line with our guidance as we've set it out? And has a consistent approach been adopted, which is the next box. This is key. Obviously, what we want to know is that if you've got 30 students, that you've determined the range of grades using a consistent approach. And again, it would be back here. Is the coursework the same? Are the homeworks the same? Have the students been given the same opportunity? And have you used a consistent approach throughout? Additional controls, these might be, for instance, where you have conflicts of interest, or you needed to put in a specific control around access to material, or anything really that you wanted to tell us about. Special considerations, reasonable adjustments, these are in line with the guidance that TLM provide for these matters. So for instance, did you need to, for a dyslexic learner, for example, produce large font material, instructional material? So it's this sort of point where you would make, so here you might refer to 1 or 2 candidates where those changes were actually applied. High-level check, it would be helpful at this point where you actually tell us who made the check and what their role was. So for instance, I would anticipate that this was a teacher that would fill this in, and then you would put here head of department checked. So you could put the name in if you wanted to, but in essence it's telling us the seniority of the person and that you've actually carried out the check. Any issues allows you to highlight any points that you wish to bring to our attention. Now, what I would suggest, there is a timeline for this, and we are looking at June with a deadline around the first week. I think it's actually in the second week of June for this to be submitted. But I would suggest that you look at submitting this as soon as you possibly can. So as soon as you can get this to us, as soon as you can use this as a method to engage with TLM and talk us through the process, then the better. Because obviously if we needed to come back to you and check anything, then it gives us a little bit of time to do that. The 30th of June, towards the end of June, we would ask for the teacher assessed grades, and this is the form for that. So the teacher assessed grades, very similar to last year, the name of the student, the qualification number, the title, and the teacher assessed grades. So you can submit them as you did last year in the same way. But we will not be accepting these, and we will not be carrying out any awarding until we've already had this document here, the declaration. So we need the declaration first, and then the teacher assessed grades. What we've said is we'd like to allow ourselves about 10 working days between you submitting the grades and the declaration. And that allows us, that 2-week period allows us to talk to you if necessary about the documentation and the quality assurance process, and just make sure that we're all happy. Okay, so let's go through then the process again. So I'll make this screen full. Okay, so here we go. So using the qualifications, determine the evidence, we talked that through. Use the previous judgments and previous marks to give you a sense check about the teacher assessed grades, and then make a determination of the actual grade. The internal quality assurance needs to be checked in the way I've just described, and then the high-level sign-off. When you've completed the sign-off, then the quality assurance, the head of centre declaration document comes in, that's step 4. When that's come in and been signed off by ourselves, you can then submit grades, which is this one here. What we will then have is a process where we will asks you to retain the evidence, because it might well be that we carry out sampling checks. Now, under certain circumstances, we might do 100% sample. In some cases, we might only limit it to 1 or 2 candidates. But the bottom line here is that we will carry out some external quality assurance of this process. So we will check that this evidence that you've used, we will have a look at some of this evidence and have a look at your processes as you set out here. So this external quality assurance check is likely to take a few working days. But once we have the teacher assessed grades and we're happy that the quality assurance is okay, we will also do some statistical checks. When we're happy that everything is okay and we're comfortable with that process, then we will award and certificate in the way that we've normally done. Now, the importance of keeping these documents in place and keeping this evidence on store is that we must allow for appeals. So again, if students appeal against these grades, we need to be able to demonstrate collectively the process that we had in place, the internal quality assurance, and also the external quality assurance that TLM have carried out. So it's important that we have the evidence. It's important that we have the process documented. And it's important that the whole package fits together so that we can explain collectively, both as a centre and also as TLM, how we've made these decisions. Okay, so I'll stop sharing now. So that summarises the process. I think the key to this process is to make sure that we have an early dialogue around the internal quality assurance. Please feel free to contact us when you send in the head of sector declaration. We will get back in touch with an approval, hopefully. And in the majority of cases, we don't see any problems, but we may come back for a certain amount of explanation. Having given the green light based on that head of sector declaration, you're then more than welcome to take the time to produce the teacher assessed grades. The deadline for this process is the last day, I think it's second week in June, it's in the guidance, but the last day is in early June for getting the centre declaration to us, but we'd advise to get that ASAP. So the earlier you start that dialogue, the better with TLM. The deadline for submitting the final grades, the teacher assessed grades, is the end of June. Of course, you can submit them earlier, but the deadline is the 30th of June. We will endeavour then to carry out the quality assurance checks that I've set out, and obviously we will then award as per normal. Now, we will continue to update our website. You can contact us to talk to us, ask us any questions you need. And also, we will update our frequently asked questions so that hopefully we provide you with enough material to make this as seamless and as comfortable a process as we possibly can, both for yourself, the centres, and also for the students themselves. So I'll end the webinar here. I hope today's been useful, and I hope the process goes well for you. Bye.